Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into something a bit different from our usual deep dives. We often talk about, information overload, just the sheer amount of stuff, but the sources you've shared pivot to this really surprising idea that some information itself can actually be harmful.
Yeah, that's right. We're looking squarely at information threats.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's not just about fake news, though that's part of it, sure. It's more about knowledge or data that, just by its nature or maybe how it spreads, can be actively damaging. It's a real shift in thinking from information overload to, well, information toxicity.
Toxicity, that's a strong word. And the range the sources cover is pretty wild, isn't it? I mean, they talk about things that can subtly mess with your thoughts, your perception, all the way up to potentially risks that could end human civilization. Seriously.
It absolutely challenges that traditional view that, all knowledge is good, more is always better. What's fascinating and kind of crucial here is understanding how any information, really, depending on how it's presented, how it's used, it can become a vector for harm. It forces you to think differently about everything you consume and share.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is to really unpack this. We need to explore the different types of information threats these sources lay out, look at how technology maybe turbocharges them, and importantly, dig into the strategies they suggest for building resilience against them. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan. Let's jump in.
So, this core concept, information threats, what does that actually mean in practice when the rubber meets the road?
Well, the basic definition the sources give is pretty clear. It's knowledge that can cause harm.
Hmm.
And yeah, the spectrum is vast. It goes from, say, minor distortions in how you personally see things, right up to these huge existential risks for everyone.
That's such a turnaround from most of history, isn't it? Where the big problem was always a lack of information, not enough knowledge. Now we're drowning in it, and the worry shifts from just having too much to having stuff that's actually actively damaging. You mentioned the sources use that phrase, much of it causes harm. That really flips the script.
It completely does. And they don't waste time connecting this to the impact on individual consciousness, how it messes with your thinking directly. And then they scale it right up. Collective harm. They bring up historical things like witch hunts, which
Agreed.
shows how these threats tap into really fundamental human vulnerabilities. Our cognitive biases, how we behave in groups. It's not just the information in a vacuum, it's how it interacts with us.
Which really suggests we need a whole new kind of literacy, doesn't it? Not just is this source credible, but understanding the potential impact of information, how it might spread, even if the information itself is technically factual, but maybe dangerous in a specific context.
That's precisely it.
Yeah.
A deeper kind of critical engagement.
So how do these threats actually work? How do they manifest? The sources lay out a kind of typology, right? Based on how they cause harm.
Yeah, they propose a helpful framework, classifying them by mechanism and effect. Makes it easier to grasp.
Okay, let's walk through that. Where do they start?
They begin with what they call cognitive threats. These are the ones aimed squarely at individual perception and thinking. The goal is basically to make you misinterpret things or believe stuff that just isn't real.
Like making you see what isn't there, as they put it? Okay, that makes sense. But they also list examples that sound almost trivial, things like earworm songs or scary videos. How does a song stuck in your head fit with serious cognitive distortion? Seems like a leap.
Well, the insight here is about the mechanism. Even those seemingly harmless things like an earworm or a jump scare video, they capture your cognitive resources. They take up mental bandwidth, right? They distract you. They trigger emotions. And crucially, the sources argue, they can actually reduce your capacity for critical thinking at that moment.
Ah, okay. So an earworm isn't harmful in itself, but it uses the same channel, the same mechanism that more malicious things could use. It bypasses rational filters.
Exactly. It just loops. It occupies space without your explicit permission, almost.
And in today's world, the whole attention economy, that ability to just grab and hold your mental space is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. Which points to this growing need for what the sources call cognitive hygiene. Being really conscious about what information you're letting in and how it might be affecting your thinking, your mood, your focus.
Cognitive hygiene. I like that.
The surprising bit is realizing the underlying process can be similar, whether it's a catchy ad jingle or, sophisticated propaganda designed to warp your view of reality.
And the sources draw this really important line, this slippery slope. They connect those initial cognitive glitches, like seeing what isn't there, directly to huge societal harms like witch hunts. How does that work?
It's not just about you individually believing something false, although that's the start. But if that distorted perception, that false belief, gets shared, if it gets amplified within a group, a community, online, it starts to build. It can solidify into a kind of collective delusion, a shared false reality about some enemy or threat.
Okay, I see. And that shared delusion then becomes the justification for action.
Precisely. It can justify really harmful actions. Historically, literal witch hunts. Today,
Mm.
maybe online pile-ons, political polarization fueled by misinformation, real-world discrimination or violence based on false narratives. It underlines why addressing even those seemingly minor distortions matters. Because individual inability to grasp reality when it spreads can create deeply dangerous collective outcomes.
That flows pretty naturally into the next category they mention, ideological threats. These sound like they operate more at the societal level, manipulating group beliefs, big narratives.
Exactly. This is where they explicitly mention the potential for actual witch hunts, using the historical shorthand for the destructive potential.
So what's the mechanism here? How do these work differently from cognitive threats?
They aim to provoke collective hysteria, to polarize groups against each other, to provide a justification for persecution, and ultimately to really damage social cohesion. It's less about making one person see something false, and more about shaping the entire frame through which a society interprets events and facts. It's a battle for narrative control.
And what makes societies vulnerable to this?
Well, our shared understanding of truth, our common values, that consensus is surprisingly fragile, and modern digital ecosystems, unfortunately, can be incredibly effective at amplifying marginal, even harmful ideologies, making them seem way more prevalent or legitimate than they are.
Yeah.
This really challenges the ability of diverse societies, like democracies, to maintain a healthy public space where you can disagree without totally fragmenting into hostile camps.
Okay, so we've gone from individual minds to societal narratives. What's next? The sources also talk about behavioral and imitation threats, right?
Yes, these are perhaps more direct. They're basically information packets designed to encourage people to do dangerous or harmful things.
Ah, so providing instructions, essentially.
Pretty much. The sources give examples like forbidden instructions, which sounds ominous, and they specifically point to the explicitly incorrect recipe for flammable substance from Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club book.
Right, I remember that. So information that literally tells you how to cause harm or take huge risks.
Exactly. The mechanism is straightforward. Provide actionable instructions, encourage risky imitation, maybe bypass ethical concerns or normal caution. And the Fight Club example is really potent because it highlights how even fictional information, if it's taken out of context or if it reaches someone vulnerable or looking for trouble, can become a real-world danger.
And the internet throws the doors wide open for that kind of stuff, doesn't it? Removes all the old gatekeepers.
Completely. Which raises huge questions about responsibility. Who's responsible when harmful instructions spread? The creator, the platform hosting it, the person sharing it, the user acting on it.
It's messy.
Very messy. And it brings up that dilemma around forbidden instructions.
Yeah, that phrase, who gets to decide what knowledge is forbidden? That sounds like censorship, which has its own dangers.
It absolutely does. The sources don't offer easy answers, but they imply some knowledge might just be too dangerous for completely unrestricted access. But they also acknowledge the massive risks of censorship. It suggests we need a really nuanced approach, one that tries to balance safety with freedom of speech, that considers context, maybe focuses on promoting counter-narratives and education instead of just trying to ban things. It's a tough balancing act.
Okay, let's shift gears now. The sources move into what seem like the most advanced, maybe the scariest risks, the technological vectors and existential risks.
Yeah, this is where things get pretty speculative, but also potentially profound. They start with something they call the virtual Pandora's box.
The virtual Pandora's box sounds dramatic, and the specific threat tied to it is chilling. A quantum computer will be able to obtain all your personal data.
hmm The implications there are just staggering. It means our current encryption methods, the very bedrock of digital security for everything from bank accounts to government secrets, could become useless overnight, obsolete,
So everything we thought was safe, locked away.
potentially exposed, all of it. This isn't just a minor tech upgrade we need to patch. It's a fundamental break. It could destabilize global information infrastructure, personal privacy, national security, everything.
And this isn't science fiction, is it? This is something experts are actively working on countermeasures for now.
Absolutely. It requires massive, proactive, global efforts to develop and implement what's called post-quantum cryptography, new ways to secure data. The urgency as the source's stress, comes from the retroactive risk. Once a powerful enough quantum computer exists,
Yeah.
it could potentially decrypt data that was encrypted years ago, data you thought was safe forever.
Ah, so it's not just future data, it's past data too.
Exactly. It's irreversible. Permanent damage potential. That's the Pandora's box idea. Once that capability is out, you can't stuff it back in. The secrets are potentially out forever.
Wow, okay. That's a lot.
And that leads into the final, most abstract layer, existential information risks.
Yes. This is where the sources throw out some really mind-bending concepts. Things like nukes against viruses, why aliens don't want to talk to us, and that final, stark phrase, you will never know the truth again.
These sound less like concrete threats and more like philosophical nightmares.
Yeah,
Risks to civilization itself or reality.
that's a good way to put it. They represent fundamental risks, yes, to human civilization, or even to our ability to agree on objective reality.
Okay, let's take why aliens don't want to talk to us. How on earth does that relate to information threats? Sounds like pure sci-fi speculation.
Well, they connect it to the Fermi paradox.
Yeah.
You know, the question of where is everybody? Why haven't we found evidence of other intelligent life? And they link that to the Great Filter hypothesis. The idea that there might be some inevitable challenge or hurdle that prevents most civilizations from surviving long enough to become interstellar.
The sources then suggest that maybe dangerous knowledge is the great filter. Information like, perhaps, the principle behind nukes against viruses, which sounds like a metaphor for incredibly powerful technology being catastrophically misused, leading to self-destruction.
So the idea is that civilizations discover knowledge that's too powerful for them to handle responsibly, and they wipe themselves out. Managing dangerous information is the key cosmic test.
That's the implication. It reframes our current struggles with information threats not just as a 21st century problem, but potentially as a universal challenge for any advanced intelligence. It's information risk on a cosmic scale.
That's a humbling perspective. And then there's that final, really unsettling idea. You will never know the truth again. What's behind that?
This, maybe, is the ultimate information threat they describe. The systemic collapse of the very concept of objective truth.
How could that even happen?
Think about a future maybe not even that distant where deepfakes are perfect, utterly indistinguishable from reality. Combine that with pervasive, AI-driven propaganda, algorithmic echo chambers sorting us into separate realities, and just the sheer overwhelming volume of conflicting narratives. The sources suggest we could reach a point where discerning what's actually true becomes functionally impossible for most people, most of the time. A permanent fog.
An existential crisis for reason itself, for democracy, for making
Yeah.
any kind of informed choice.
Exactly. If truth becomes permanently elusive, how does society function? How do we solve complex problems together? How do we even maintain a shared reality to debate? It fundamentally undermines everything: collective decision-making, scientific progress, even your sense of personal identity, if your memories and beliefs are constantly being manipulated.
So this calls for what? How do you even fight that?
The sources suggest it requires a massive societal commitment to what they call epistemic resilience, building the systems, the skills, the technologies needed to protect and verify the concept of objective reality itself.
Okay, so we've mapped out this pretty terrifying landscape of threats, from annoying earworms right up to the potential end of truth as we know it. Given all that, what do the sources suggest we actually do? How can we collectively and individually build this resilience?
Well, the good news is they don't just leave us with the problems. They outline a multi-pronged approach. It's clear there's no single silver bullet. First, and absolutely foremost, they stress cultivating critical information literacy.
Okay, that sounds foundational, like the bedrock skill for navigating this environment, learning how to evaluate sources, spot bias, understand arguments, tell fact from fiction, or manipulation.
Precisely. It's about building your personal internal defense system against those cognitive and ideological threats we talked about. But it's deeper than just fact-checking websites. It's about understanding how information works on you, recognizing your own biases, your own emotional triggers. It needs to be baked into education, lifelong learning.
Building that mental firewall, yeah, makes sense. What else?
Next, they emphasize fostering digital ethics and responsibility.
So this isn't just about how you consume information, but also how you create it, share it, manage it, thinking about the impact.
Exactly. It includes ethical considerations in developing AI, handling data responsibly, thinking about the consequences of what you put out there. Remember the Fight Club recipe example. That highlights how the ethical burden isn't solely on the end user. Creators, platforms, they all have a role. It means fostering a collective conversation about norms, guidelines, and that tricky balance between openness and preventing harm.
Okay, so critical thinking skills plus an ethical framework. Then there's the technical side, presumably.
Absolutely essential. Investing in robust cybersecurity and data management.
This is where things like post-quantum cryptography come in, secure data storage, anticipating threats.
Yes, this directly tackles that virtual Pandora's box threat. It protects against catastrophic data breaches that can fuel disinformation or cause direct harm. And the key word here is proactive. We need to be building the defenses for tomorrow's threats, like quantum computing today. It's about treating cybersecurity as fundamental critical infrastructure for society.
Right, not just an IT department issue. And the final piece they mention.
Promoting pluralism and countering information monocultures.
Okay, what does that mean practically? Encouraging diverse news sources, supporting independent media.
All of that. Plus, creating spaces where different viewpoints can be discussed constructively, pushing back against filter bubbles and echo chambers. This is about building resilience against those ideological threats. A diverse, healthy information ecosystem where multiple perspectives are accessible and debated openly is much harder for a single, harmful narrative to capture and polarize. It prevents those dangerous information monocultures where everyone thinks the same, often wrong thing.
So it requires active effort to ensure we're exposed to different ideas, even uncomfortable ones, in a constructive way.
Yes, policies, platform designs, media literacy efforts, they all play a part in resisting this slide into fragmented, hostile information silos.
Okay, so looking back across this whole deep dive, wow. We've journeyed from threats targeting our individual attention, our perception, scaled up through societal manipulation, dangerous instructions, and touched on these huge, almost overwhelming risks tied to technology and the potential breakdown of truth itself.
It's quite a landscape.
Mhm.
And the path forward, drawing from these sources, is clearly complex. It needs individual commitment, building those critical skills. It needs societal focus on digital ethics, on supporting information diversity, and it needs serious institutional investment in cybersecurity, in education that prepares people for this reality.
And ultimately, underlying all of that, it feels like the most fundamental challenge is protecting that very concept of objective reality, especially in the face of that chilling possibility that you will never know the truth again.
It really underscores that this isn't just a technical problem. It's a collective human responsibility to cultivate not just more information, but a healthier information environment for everyone.
Well, this deep dive has certainly shown that the very pursuit of knowledge, something we usually see as purely good, it might actually contain these inherent deep-seated risks. Risks that force us constantly to weigh the incredible benefits of openness and discovery against the potential for really profound harm, maybe even, as the sources suggest, existential harm. So the question we leave you with is, how do you navigate that balance in the information you choose to consume, and perhaps more importantly, the information you choose to share?